The most confusing thing of having a narcissistic and emotionally immature parent is that sometimes this parent is going to be nice to you. And unfortunately, that makes things a little bit worse for you because if they're not being consistently cruel and judgmental and unsafe, which is painful, and sometimes they're being nice and kind and gentle and supportive, you're left there thinking, what have I done to initiate this change? And so you take it upon yourself to make somebody who is emotionally unstable become a safe space for you. So you take the responsibility to make sure that you remain safe in what is a relationally unsafe and unstable environment. Today, we're going to talk about these confusions, and also what I want to really address today is the duality of things and being able to hold two truths about who someone is. Because you hear me be very judgmental against narcissistic parents, and that's not because I have my heart is like made of stone, and I'm a highly judgmental person, which I may be at occasions, and with certain things, I can sound a little bit unforgiving. But something that you will also face in your own healing journey is when you will have to embrace a duality that is very confusing to really comprehend unless you get there in terms of how you heal. And before we begin, this has nothing to do with forgiveness and nothing to do with you going back to the narcissistic parents if you've been estranged, right? But it has to do with an inner assortment, an inner arrangement of where you stand with these people when you're able to see them in both black and white simultaneously, not even a gray, right? There's not a middle ground. There's two very different fundamental sides of these people that most of you have experienced. Now, there's going to be some of you who will say, my parent has been consistently this, and that. Well, this video may not really resonate with you then. So you can watch any other of my videos that I'm pretty straightforward about the experience of narcissistic parents. But in this one, we will talk about the confusing experience of them actually occasionally being good and how confusing this is for us in terms of where do we stand when it comes to these people. All right, so the ways in which these parents that we call them narcissistic, but if you've been following my content for a while now, you will see that what I refer to as narcissistic is really a byproduct of really harsh and emotionally violent parenting that has generationally been raising children that then become parents and come to parenthood with all of that load. And then we have what we are sort of seeing now, generationally passed on sort of a narcissism through how we abuse our children. And it's not just narcissism for being narcissism. It's also very much entangled and infused with patriarchal values that are part of the narcissistic upbringing, right? There's harshness, there's attack to the worth, there's misogyny, there's control, there's abuse of the most vulnerable. So the principles that are underlying in patriarchal societies are the underlying flavor of parenting, which is the narcissistic parenting, which is you have a person of authority abusing that authority for their own benefit and controlling and abusing others and using others really for their own benefit, to look good, to feel good, to serve them. And ultimately, children are being seen as what I constantly keep saying, a retirement plan, a secured retirement plan parents can rely on, which normally and anthropologically would have been like expected, right? Somebody raises you, you bond with them. Of course, when they're struggling, you want to take care of them. But these people have been so cruel that then having the expectation that they would be taken care of after all that cruelness, and most of them continue to perpetuate that cruelness, is a little bit too much, right? And it's only become too much in the latest years, although it's always been too much of an expectation. But as we've been healing, we're like, why am I being loyal and devoted to an abuser? Why am I tolerating, right? And that cannot just apply to the new people, because naturally when we're awakened and more aware and we do inner work, we stop tolerating abuse from everyone, and the boundaries apply to everyone, not just strangers, but more specifically, those closest to us. We may even hold them to higher standards, right? That's expected. Right? What do these parents do that are confusing to us? Again, these people are not psychologically or developmentally fully mature in the sense that they show up to parenthood with a lot of insecurity, and the way they see their children is not clean sort of view of who that child is, right? They see you through projections, through their own inner self-hatred, through cultural sort of ideas. You're a girl, you're a boy, what they expect of you and all that. But what you can experience with parents like that is sometimes they'll be really warm and nice and affectionate. And you may come home with something and they're like, I'm so proud of you. They'll say something like that. And then the next minute, they could be critical, dismissive, or just humiliate you. And also, what they will do in a lot of ways, which is very heartbreaking to experience, is they may say something to you today when you're struggling, and then the next day they say something cruel. And if you say, come on, yesterday you told me this, they'll say something like, I lied, right? So even when they give, sometimes in retrospect, they will take it back, which makes you really not trust in anything that's around you. But the hurt that you're feeling when this happens cannot be articulated in the sense, oh, you're betraying me, you're hurting me, you're mean. It's really an internalized sense of being left alone to internally process something confusing. You are relying on somebody so unstable, and then you are losing the inner stability, which then translates as inner self-trust and inner expectation that the world is nice, because the world is not really nice to you, is it? Another thing that they do is they can be generous. They can be generous with their money, right? They could be always giving you money, providing for you. Some, and I don't know, I would say some, but I think a lot, and most of the narcissistic parents that we're talking about will somehow financially abuse and control you. If they are rich, you will be held sort of like hostage to the money that they're giving to you. And if they're not, maybe they will financially abuse you, taking your pocket money, because, they feel like they are entitled to that because they're parenting you. They don't have boundaries or allow you to develop your own financial independence. But what I'm going to refer to here is more like they're generous in general, like money was not an issue. You always got pocket money. You went to a good school. You had clothes. Every time you've asked for money, you were given the money, even if there were some issues along the line. But at the same time, they were very not generous emotionally, right? With their time, empathy, giving you safety, giving you emotional support, right? So a lot of these parents, which is why a lot of them will say things like, if you were to confront a parent like that, the most common thing they will say is like, you had everything you needed. When did you ever, you had shoes, you had this, you had that, but did you have love, right? I come from a family, my father's family, they were like 7 siblings, right? And my grandfather would work so hard, and they were provided for, right? And, back then there was a war. They are one of the few families in the area that always had food, shoes, and all that. Nothing. They didn't miss nothing, right? But my grandpa was so emotionally cruel to his kids that when he would go home, everybody would be instructed to go in their bed and hide and sleep because he didn't want to be disturbed. So this person that was working all day to provide to them and for them, right? They were never skipped or missed on a meal. 7 kids is a lot too, to feed 7 kids. But at the same time, there was no space for them to exist around him. So simultaneously, this person was so generous, but also at the same time withholding so much love and presence and patience and all of that, right? So in his mind, this is how he was loving and a good father. At the same time, it makes it really confusing having an experience with such a parent that will give you pretty much everything you want except what you truly and deeply need also, which, your emotional needs are important as well. But we have not been considering the emotional needs of children for the most part of our history, especially in a capitalistic and narcissistic and patriarchal society. Our job was to keep them alive. And it's not even our job, it's actually by law. We have to keep our children fed and give them shelter and also take them to school. So, the other thing that they do is maybe they will say, I'm sorry. I know this may not apply to most of you. You're like, well, sorry. They may do things that will seem like they're apologizing, right? If I think of my own sort of experience, it's more like something bad happens and then I'm given a gift or something that I wanted happens. But I've never explicitly told sorry, and the behavior doesn't truly change, right? So they will go from not talking to you for weeks to suddenly coming home, bringing something that you love, or giving you money, or saying something nice out of the blue. But this change is not consistent, and also none of what happened is addressed. And that is very painful. The things that have happened that are not addressed, almost like it doesn't matter to address that I've hurt you, right? And this is something I carry a lot into my adulthood too, with my relationships to people, all sorts of relationship, is that if something happens, I want to talk about it if we are going to reconnect. Not so that you apologize, because maybe you don't even have to apologize per se, but we need to discuss, what did we say? Why did we say? What happened to us? Where do we stand? But the idea is that, first of all, children are not really respected enough to have these conversations. And obviously, a parent who is emotionally immature will not come to this apologizing or self reflecting, but they may want to fix it and they don't know how. And they'll just do a gesture that seems like they fix it, but really, they will just continue to do that over and over and over again, which, sets us up to not be able to trust in the intentions of people. So somebody can be abusive and then can be nice and then they can change. We don't get apology, and most importantly, we don't get accountability. And there's two things I want to say here. The first is that a lot of these parents now may learn terms, right? And then they may apologize. Some of you may even waste enough time to go to therapy with people like that. And I say waste time because really, I don't think you can initiate deep change. And even if you do, you don't need parent-child therapy to do that. You just need a parent who is awakened. They need to do the therapy themselves, who is awakened to what they've done to you. And with that awareness, the true awareness, they will naturally become a kinder person to you. Like it is a byproduct. And you see there's very few, but there's a few on social media that are parents who have had this change of heart. And they've had this change of heart and they're suddenly apologizing to the children, not just in words, but they're changing their behavior. Because now what happens is when something happens, instead of blaming the child, they instead go to self-reflection first before blaming the child for being too spoiled, too entitled, asking for too much, ungrateful, and all of that. Now, the second thing I want to address here is that when people don't really apologize for what they've done, and then we could just say, okay, sorry, okay, let's forget about it, okay, let's leave it all behind. It may feel like, oh, it's been long enough, right? And many of you may have estranged yourself from your parents, and then sometime down the line, you're like, you know what? And this is actually another sign of maybe you've healed enough that it doesn't really bother you to be around them. You just don't want a close relationship because they're unsafe. But then it's dangerous to put yourself back into these environments with people that haven't changed. Because you may have healed and done all the work, but if they haven't changed, there's been long enough time that you haven't spoken to each other. They may be nice at first, but then the first given opportunity, they will revert back into their ways, which means they will hurt you again. I like to approach this from a mindset of, when you have a toxic ex, right? And you had a lot of history together. And then when you break up and then a lot of time goes by and then you're like, what if we were to revisit this? Because I've never loved anybody the way I love you. It's a toxic relationship. And it's a trauma bond. And we keep going back and then they hurt us in the same exact way over and over again until they're not going to stop hurting us, but we'll stop engaging with them. I think a narcissistic parent can have a very similar dynamic to that, right? It's not foreign concept that you've been going back and going back to both a narcissistic parent or a partner to continue and see whether this time it's going to end better, but it doesn't. And the only way these things end is if you just stop going into them, thinking and expecting these people will change. Now, they may come with phrases and words, apologies, I will respect your boundaries, you're right, and all that, which is a good start. But is it a genuine change? It is very unlikely. And it is very hard for someone to change when they're 50 and 60 and 70 if they're really not reflecting. And also, for them to change now at the older age, they will have to not only face the shame of what they did to you and to their children and to everybody in their lives, but also they will have to go through the grief of what happened to them. And that is a whole journey, as you know, the whole grief journey of our childhood, which a lot of them are not going to go into because many of them have their parents still pedestalized and they adore them. So now, what else do they do? Nurse parents that do this thing that I had to do in my own experience, they will go around and talk about you with so much praise and admiration, but at home they're horrible to you. And I remember a few years ago, I told someone, a close relative, something about, oh yeah, I don't talk to my dad, and she says, why? She was shocked, and she said, because he's horrible to me, and whatever. I didn't get into it too much. And she says, are we talking about the same person? She's like, do you know that when he talks about you, it's like there's honey coming out of his mouth? And I'm like, excuse me. And then that sort of like gave me a reminder that he would talk about me in such a way, even when I was a kid. He would be, you know, gloating to everybody about me. But in the same time, when he was with me, he would really be horrible to me. And even if he was nice to me, sometimes he would gloat to me about me, right? And tell me all these nice things about myself. And then very soon that would change because I'd done something wrong or he was in a different mood. That confusion is really bad because also beyond confusing us about who are we after all, we don't know how we are seen by this person, how we are perceived. We're trying to maintain the good image because obviously that feels good. At the same time, the world outside is not safe for us to go and tell them what's going on with this parent, because if they go around talking about you in the best possible way, which in some cases is a strategy to hide their own abuse, but in some cases is also this inability to understand that they're being so, you know, so different at home versus where they are home outside, but still makes it unsafe for you to talk about it. Nobody's going to believe you. And then it makes you feel even more lonely, right? Now, the other thing that they do is that they will deny a lot of what happened when sometimes they will, you know, oh yeah, you can have a conversation with them and they're like, yeah, you're right, this and that happened. And then the next moment or the next day, they're like, this never happened. What are you even talking about? And they will even question that the conversation that you had was the way that you had it. And so that makes you feel so confused because you thought you had a moment. You know, when you're talking to someone and you're like, we've reached an agreement, there's some stability here, we've understood each other. And then the next moment they flip and it's so drastic and sudden, then that can feel very disorienting. And again, very relationally unsafe. For me, that is a trigger. A lot of the times when I'm dealing with people, when I'm noticing a person really just be totally different in a way that feels like, whoa, I have zero tolerance for that. Because for me, it is very unsafe to try and tiptoe around people like that. We all have our mood swings. We can all kind of like go over the place. But telling someone this never happened, and completely annulating the reality or the conversation that you just had with them. Like, you know, let's say we reach an agreement, that's what we're doing. And then in the next moment, you're like, what are you talking about? We never agreed to that. And you're like, whoa, right? And that is so confusing for the person going through it, that it really sets the tone, again, for a lifetime of being relationally felt stranded, right? Because if you can't rely on other people and things that they say to you as what will happen, then what can you rely on? Like, you can't have people signing contracts all the time. You need to trust that people will show up and pull through and be consistent. And when they are not, it's really painful. and confusing and unsafe, right? Now, another very confusing experience is that these parents will be acting like they're your biggest supporter. And to this day, I can't even tell you with certainty that they're not, to some extent, genuinely thinking that they are your number one supporter. Like my dad would see things about me that, nobody else would see. Like the way he would sort of praise me for my intelligence or my abilities or believe in me, or at least say that he believes in me, was really incredible and sort of gave me this boost. But at the same time, he was sabotaging me. So like the image I have to mind is more like you're telling someone you're amazing, I believe in you, and at the same time you're chopping off their wings. And you're like, go ahead, go fly. And they're like, I can't. And they're like, how can you not? I've been telling you can do it. You're like, and it's so confusing because it happens in the same breath, right? It can be praise and shaming in the same moment, admiration and criticism in the same phrase. And so it's a very confusing. And most importantly, what it confuses you is not just if these people are safe or if they love you or if they are trustworthy, is that who are you, right? Because the main issue and the reason why we keep talking about childhood trauma long after it is done is because the way we see and understand ourselves has been affected by how we were seen and understood by these people. So when they've been consistently so confusing, right? We are very confused about who we are, right? Are we good? Are we a child that somebody would be proud of or somebody should be ashamed of themselves? Are we somebody who is, worthy to exist? Or are we somebody who is absolutely worthless, right? Are we the best thing that happened to these people and they love us so much? Or are we the reason why they suffer, right? And I know many of you will relate to that, right? A narcissistic parent is struggling so much to show up in parenthood that it makes you feel like you are the reason for their suffering. And don't get me started in ways, especially narcissistic mothers will shame their daughters and be like, I ruined my body for you. I stayed in this marriage for you. I did all these things for you. Which again is an added burden to our experience and our lives, right? So all of this confusion and plus more, which maybe you want to share about it in the comments, it makes it so that we come out of our childhood, first of all, with a very confusing view of who we are and a very childlike understanding of how we can actually manipulate the environment around us so that this unsafe environment turns into safe. Which is why we'll go to toxic environments, have toxic friends, toxic lovers, and work our way up to making them be nice to us because that's the only thing we know how to do, right? We don't know how to be in environments that are consistent, kind, actually like us for who we are. If we are ever found in these environments, we feel unsafe because we don't know how to navigate these experiences. And we're also just waiting for when it's going to be, again, taken away from us, right? So we're being prepped to only know how to survive in environments that are relationally unsafe. So we don't see ourselves as somebody clearly as who we are. We see ourselves as all of this contradiction through the contradictive lens. So am I bad? Am I good? Am I worthy? Am I unworthy? Like it's massively like either one or the other. There's no middle ground. And at the end of it all, we stop trusting in the goodness of the world because the world has been unsafe, unreliable, and inconsistent since day one. And when I say world, I mean the mini cosmos of our childhood, which is the intimate relationship with our parent, right? Which will then translate into the intimate relationship to others, but most importantly, the intimate relationship to ourselves. So finally, where does this bring us? To how we treat ourselves, how we view ourselves and how we treat ourselves in all of these contradictions. So we could be nice to ourselves about certain things and then we do something else and then we are just unleashing all of the poison we've been sort of trying to hold back, right? And you will see a lot of you in the healing journey, you may be talking to yourself in a nicer way and then all of a sudden you will just go off right? I remember I had this experience when I first started doing some work. I was like, let me just change the way I talk to myself without doing inner healing, really, right? Without doing grief work or empathy work through reparenting myself. It was more like, let me be nicer to myself. So I was nice to myself once, twice, three times, five. And then I make a mistake and oh no, I would have never spoken to another person with so much cruelty in the way that I had easy and accessible emotional cruelty for myself because I was just repeating things I have heard. It was easy. I just hit on play and the tape was rolling. And it wasn't until I did a lot of inner work and work with my inner critic and a lot of inner child work and reparenting and working through my father wound and mother wound that I actually shifted towards myself in a way that even if I am like less patient, I can never hit play because that tape is destroyed, right? Maybe there's some words and tracks or some distorted sounds coming sometimes, but the tape as a whole that was always like ready to go is gone, right? So the confusing experience that we've had growing up makes it confusing on how we are with ourselves. So we're not consistent with ourselves, we're not trustworthy with ourselves, but also we cannot hold the duality of things. And that interferes with how we view life as adults, right? So we meet people and we're like, somebody's going to say, this person did this horrible thing to me. And we're like, well, they were nice to me. So we're like, I see that part of the world, you say that part of the world. I cannot hold both that this person that was good to me, it's actually a bad person, right? And it could be all sorts of people, right? It's not just somebody who did something really horrible. So we are not able to hold dualities. And when we're not able to hold dualities, we will just have one or another black or white ideas about people. They're either good or bad, which is a very childlike way of seeing things, right? And it's very unsafe because if somebody, for example, is unsafe to everybody around us, but to us now is good, and we're not able to take in and register what they're doing to these other people, eventually we'll be in the place of those other people because we naively just held the good side. If we know that somebody has a really bad side with so many people, we're not special. Maybe we're just a not yet, right? And this is something that we have to learn as women with men, right? When we know that some men are a certain way, some women will think they're special when they're finally chosen by a man like that. But we're not special. We're just not yet. What happened to any other woman is going to happen to us too. And it's a matter of time because it is impossible that this person has been horrible and abusive to so many women, but it's going to be good to you. But coming out of the childhoods that we are coming out of, we think that this is a possibility, but in reality, it's not. There's a high probability, right? But the duality that I wanted to really help you sort of see here is this: that eventually, when you start healing, you will see just the bad side of your parents. No, before healing, you'll just see that your parents are really nice. They did all these things to you, blah blah. You will feel guilty to even address your childhood trauma, and I see this with clients. I see this through Reflections of Heal, right? And it's always the same theme. I have two very, very important sessions, which is the mother session and the father session. The mother session comes first. For most people, the mother session is where they're like, she's a narcissistic mother, she's cruel. They see it very clearly. And then they will say something, but my father, blah, 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 right? And then they do the father session. And then something begins to shift because usually we come into this thinking, this parent was bad, the other parent was good. And then I have another session on top of this session, which is more like the threads that sort of bind you with these people. So you see the dynamic from so many angles, and I'm helping you see where you stood, right? And this is important because then you're able to see that the other parent, which I have a video about this other parent, I'm going to link it here, was not so innocent after all. And it matters that you know, because it matters that you understand the ways in which you've been failed so that you can heal from these ways, right? From these things. So what I see is, firstly, most people are very easy and quick to see the one parent, but are really reluctant to see the other parent. But that wound with the other parent is being perpetuated everywhere in their lives. And most importantly, usually in their romantic relationships. So what is important here is that we can see, right? We start with denial. We don't want to see it. Then we see it. And when we do see it, then as we move on to our journey, we start bringing the humanity of the situation. Now, in the space of humanity, some people are like, oh, you have empathy, you have to understand your parents, be nice to them, they did everything they could and all that. I don't really like the notion of forgiveness. I think it's problematic. And actually, I think it's very, very, very infused with religious sort of ideas, which I do not abide by. I don't like them. I don't trust them. I don't want them. I don't care about them. I don't see any morality in forgiving. But I do see that in the process of our journey, we go from denial to seeing it clearly, and we're like, oh no, and we don't want to be around them, and we're thinking and we're analyzing, we go back in the past, we see all of that, but eventually where we arrive is a place where we can see all of this in a broader view and see that one, we've been hurt immensely, and it could have been prevented if they just did not exercise so much cruelty. If they had just empathy, right? If they just had empathy, it would have been different. And in the same breath, we could just look on the other side and be like, it was impossible for them to cultivate empathy because we see that generationally, this is the cruelty that we experienced was generational, right? And when we see that, we don't forgive or forget or go back and be like, now I love you, let's all be together. No. But there's a clear idea that these people could have been both at some points good to us and did provide and did work hard to keep us alive and to do all these things. And at the same time, they were so immensely cruel to us that, again, has come from generations behind them, but it's still them that inflicted the harm, right? Because in the same way, we were also generationally passed on all of this toxicity, right, by the way that we were raised. But a lot of us are choosing to be different. And I've worked with a lot of people that as parents are showing up so differently, but they're seeing that it takes work to undo all this conditioning. And most of them can be really nice to their children and loving, but still very horrible to themselves, which is why I preach that I think to be a good parent, essentially, you don't just have to learn about how to be a good parent. You just have to be a good parent to yourself. Like through your inner healing work, you will know what it's like to be nice to a child because you will learn how to be nice to yourself. So I think it's a process that comes full circle. And, I have some friends who are mothers as well, and they'll ask me, what should I do? And my answer is always, if you were that child, what would you want people to do for you? This is the only way to go about this. You're the only one who knows what is needed here. Only if you have enough empathy to connect with that child based on what it felt like to be a child yourself, right? So when we're connected to that, it is easier. So holding this duality will just make it easier for us to, I'm going to say digest, but more like process really what happened and understand that it didn't start with us, but it did happen to us. And also, even with this whole picture, we don't have to go back. We don't have to be around them. And we will have to decide the amount of closeness that we want. What will be avoided here, based on being able to see this duality, is every time they do a nice thing, that we go back. And every time they do a bad thing, we go back to hating ourselves, right? When we hold the duality, we will understand the following. The people can be both good and bad, depending on how willing they are to look into themselves every time they're hurting someone that they love. If when we love someone, for the love that we have for them, we actively work on changing so we don't hurt them, not so that we earn their love, but because we generally hurt when we're hurting them, then that makes us somebody who, in time, we become safer to the people that we love if they choose to come close to us. But if we were someone who has been generationally abused, passed on all this trauma that then translated as narcissism infused with so much patriarchal conditioning and misogyny, and we are unchanging. If we have a moment of change of heart when we're doing something nice, the child from its perspective understands this was just this moment, and this moment cannot negate or cancel or make it so that now you're a safe person. A changed behavior in the long term will be what can take us back. But a lot of these parents are like, first of all, will do gestures like that, And then you're left confused. You say, oh, I'm going to have to go back. Now I feel guilty. Why are they sending me presents? Why are they doing all these nice things? And then also a lot of these parents, they don't apologize. They don't talk about what happened. They don't take accountability, right? And to some, this may sound like arrogance. Why would you want your parent to apologize to you? They have to. The only way we go back to people who have hurt us is if they are genuinely willing to address and apologize about what happened, so that we can actually see if they're working towards becoming safe. If not, we're just going to go back because it's been long enough, and they will sadly do the same. And we will be left hurt and all over again, having to withdraw from it and learn how to live without them, right? So this duality will serve us to navigate the changes, and also will serve us to navigate perhaps the guilt when it comes to the time that they will inevitably need us as they're growing old to decide what it is that we are to do. Because some of these parents may need you, and if you go back, will still treat you horribly, even if they need you, because they fundamentally cannot respect you. Some of them may change as they grow old and become softer, be it because they're in need and they know it. It doesn't matter. If at least they're nicer, kinder, more generous, and they understand that it's about time that they treat you as an equal person and no longer like someone they're in control of, right? There's no hierarchy anymore. They're not granted respect just because they're your parents. They cannot be abusing you and you going back. There's this very dumb woman online. Oh no, when I see her, I feel so furious. She has this video. It says more like, I'm sorry, but there's a hierarchy here and I'm on a higher place than you because I'm more mature than you. And thankfully, a lot of people in the comment are telling her this. I now get why your kids are not talking to you. But nonetheless, the parents that come to this seeing you as no longer someone they can overpower or should overpower, it means they have done a lot of deconditioning and deconstructing themselves from these patriarchal and toxic and narcissistic ideas of being the owner of your child, right? And being owed also the life that you've been given. So I hope this video has helped you clarify some things. I really think that the answer to everything in life is something we will all arrive to in our own time and with our own understanding. Nobody can enforce some idea on us, which is why it is important that we take our own healing journeys and explore these relationships. Some people will say, it was your father, they did the best they could. Yes, but you have to acknowledge what they did to you as well. And that was cruel and that was mean. And that has impacted me in so many other ways. So I have to work through that. And I'm going to have to hold him accountable for me to do that, right? So there's a lot of things that we have to do, but we will have to rely on our own inner maturity. Nobody's going to tell us, don't talk to your mother. Stay away from her. We can say it, but it's not up to us. It is up to you to firstly not be in denial about how cruel she was, to work through the wounds that she has created in you, she has inflicted on you, and then to decide the amount of closeness that you want with her, not because the society told you, because you're trying to be a good daughter and a good girl, and not because you feel forced, not because you feel guilty, but because that's the decision that you come to as a grown and an emotionally mature woman. The difference between somebody emotionally immature and somebody emotionally mature is firstly the ability to self-reflect in a genuine way, not just preaching words, but really self-reflect, which includes ways to change our behaviors in order to stop hurting someone, right? And the second thing that makes us emotionally mature is that we're no longer looking at our own parents as if we're children, which means we have worked through our childhood trauma. We don't have them in pedestals. We're not in denial. And we're able to hold the duality of life, which is that the people who brought us to life, who have done arguably a very kind thing, right? To be brought to life is a massive thing and a massive sacrifice, in my opinion. And at the same time, some of them failed at it, at raising us so catastrophically that we're still picking up the pieces. And they're still, amidst all of that, unsafe to be around. So I'll see you soon.